Okay, so some really interesting developments in this whole saga of the Supreme Court's draft majority opinion overturning Roe v. Wade being leaked. CNN is reporting that Chief Justice John Roberts will not join this majority draft written by Alito that would overturn Roe. My reaction to this is LOL. No kidding. No kidding. Is Roberts, the notorious squish, not going to take part in what's the most important, the most monumental, the most significant ruling in modern history, if not in our nation's history? This doesn't surprise me at all. I want to bring up this tweet. This is from a reporter at CNN. His name is Mike Valerio, and this is what he reported. He said, Roberts does not want to completely overturn Roe v. Wade, meaning he apparently would be dissenting from Alito's draft opinion, likely with the court's 3 liberals, sources tell CNN. Roberts is willing, however, to uphold the Mississippi law banning abortion at 15 weeks, CNN learned. Roberts called CNN, and that, my friends, tells you everything you need to know about John Roberts. He is a complete squish. So this should not be surprising to any of us who've been paying attention to Roberts' entire legacy on the court. But what's really interesting is after yesterday's episode where I shared basically my theory on who this leaker is, who was it who leaked this draft majority opinion, which has never happened before in the history of the Supreme Court. A fully formed written majority opinion has never been leaked in this way. And I shared who I thought the leaker was. I think it's a Sotomayor clerk. I think it's most likely Amit Jain, who has been very political in the past. He criticized Yale when he was a Yale student for supporting Kavanaugh during the Kavanaugh confirmation hearings. And in 2017, he was the source for Josh Gerstein at Politico. And then Josh Gerstein, even though he's a national security reporter, wrote about this majority opinion. So that's my theory. But there are many of you asked about some other theories that have been floating around, about some other potential or other people who could potentially be the leakers. So let's talk about this, my friends. I'm Liz Wheeler. This is The Liz Wheeler Show. I like Bambee, and I think you will too, because small business owners, have you ever had an issue with employee attendance? Have you had an employee altercation in the workplace? Have you ever stressed about navigating through HR compliance? The bad news is that one complaint against your company can turn your world upside down. The good news is Bambee is here to help small business owners implement good HR practices. Bambee is an HR platform built for businesses just like yours so that you can automate the most important HR practices and get your own dedicated HR manager. Bambee's HR Autopilot automates your core policies, this meaning workplace training, employee feedback. Then your dedicated HR manager will help you navigate the more complex parts of HR and guide you to compliance. They're available by phone, email, or real-time chat. Make this comparison. An in-house HR manager at your company or your business can cost up to $80,000 a year. But with Bambee, your dedicated HR manager starts at just $99 a month. No hidden fees, cancel anytime. You run your business, let Bambee run your HR. Go to Bambee.com/Liz right now for your free HR audit. Use my URL, Bambee, BAMBEE.com/Liz. That's Bambee.com/Liz to take control of your business. Okay, so after yesterday's episode where I posited who I suspect could very plausibly be the leaker behind this draft majority opinion being made public before it should have been, many of you asked about the idea that maybe it wasn't a Sotomayor clerk, maybe it was actually a conservative who leaked this draft majority opinion. Why would a conservative leak an opinion like this? Why would they violate the norms, the traditions of this deliberative body of the judiciary? Well, the theory behind this particular leaking theory was a conservative would leak this Alito ruling in an effort to actually cement the words that Alito wrote in this draft opinion, perhaps before they were watered down during negotiations, maybe with Kavanaugh or with Gorsuch. And because it would cement it, by the way. This actually is an interesting theory. I find it interesting, at least. Because any changes that are made to the final draft of this ruling, any changes that we can now see are different than this draft ruling, are going to look political, right? It's going to look motivated or impacted by, by this leak, by the reaction from the left, whether it's U.S. senators, Democratic senators like Schumer or Klobuchar or Bernie Sanders, whether it's the backlash from pro-aborts out in front of the Supreme Court, whatever it may be, it's going to look political, right? If there's any changes, if it's watered down, if it's weakened at all from this draft version, it's going to look like the changes were political. So I find this to be a very interesting thought experiment. Was it a conservative who violated the judiciary, the tradition of the judiciary, in order to cement Alito's words? This was proposed, of course, by a leftist, but there are some conservatives. There are some people I've talked to. I've spent the last 48 hours just constantly texting and talking on the phone and discussing everything about this with the entire conservative movement. And there are a lot of conservatives who actually think that this might be the case, that this might be true. I, however, suspect that this is not what happened. It's interesting to think about, but I suspect it's not what happened. And here's the reason why I think that it was not a conservative who leaked this. I think we can look at the response from the Democratic Party, this coordinated response between, Bernie Sanders calling for the end of the filibuster, Elizabeth Warren calling for the end of the filibuster, Amy Klobuchar calling for the end of the filibuster, Chuck Schumer calling for the end of the filibuster, all of these people calling for three things: the end of the filibuster, to pack the Supreme Court, and for Congress to legislatively pass the equivalent of Roe v. Wade, meaning abortion on demand with no restrictions. This response was so coordinated, so immediate, and I think that shows us that it would almost have to have been a liberal leaker to maybe preemptively coordinate with at least Democratic operatives, if not the actual senators themselves. And by the way, there should be investigations into whether senators and their staff, who exactly had access to this before the story broke, whether any of these Democrats knew about this before Politico even broke the report. But it's supposed to serve as a trigger, right? It's supposed to serve as a trigger for Congress to take action on these exact things, on packing the Supreme Court, on abolishing the filibuster, and on legislating Roe from our legislature. And so for that reason, I suspect it was not a conservative. I don't think it was a conservative. I also, from a moral standpoint, understanding the threat that this poses to our judiciary, I'd be extra disappointed if it was a conservative, because a conservative should know better. A conservative shouldn't do this. And I suspect a conservative who was clerking for any one of the conservative justices would understand the importance of this deliberative freedom where justices can discuss and debate and, yes, even negotiate on phraseology and draft opinions without it being subject to the political scrutiny. If it were to be made public, I would think that a conservative clerk would understand the specific and special role that the judiciary plays in our in being a balance to the other two branches of government. So that's the second theory, if you will. The first theory is Amit Jain, the Sotomayor clerk. The second theory is, was it a conservative? Was it a conservative? Now, a reporter friend of mine who I greatly respect, we've been friends for years, asked me today whether I thought that it was the intel community, not a clerk at all, not a staffer at the Supreme Court. He said, do you think that this was the intel community that perhaps was surveilling? Was this a surveillance of the Supreme Court, of the email systems? Was this essentially hacking? And is this, he asked me, is this why the Politico reporter who broke this was not related to the Supreme Court? He's a national security reporter. Because intuitively, you might think, well, why was Josh Gerstein the one who was the recipient of this leak? Why didn't this leaker take it to a judicial analyst, maybe like Jeffrey Toobin at CNN? Why Josh Gerstein? And my first thought is, well, I don't put anything past the intel community. They've betrayed our trust. They've destroyed their credibility. I mean, we can see from Russia collusion and, the so-called Ukraine whistleblower that they are willing to do literally anything to further their agenda and destroy their opposition. However, I also think that this is unlikely that it was the intel community for a couple of reasons. I think that The reason that Gerstein, as a national security reporter, was most likely chosen was either because of a pre-existing relationship, if it was Amit Jain, a pre-existing relationship between the two, or because national security reporters are well known for keeping the name of their sources close to their chest. They won't leak your name in the aftermath, even if there's a media firestorm. And so that could have been the reason. And Jeffrey Toobin at CNN, for example, is known for leaking a lot of things. Let's just put it that way. He's not exactly known for being on the up and up, is he? So no, I favor simple explanations first. And if simple explanations don't serve or are implausible or have been disproven, then we can move to the more complex explanations. But we shall see. We shall simply see. As the hours go by, there are certainly more theories about this. The Marshal of the Supreme Court has been tasked with finding this out. There were initial reports, rumblings that the FBI would be brought in, and I guess I suspect that the FBI will be brought in only if the case has not been cracked in the next day or two. But as Jesse Kelly so aptly observed on Twitter, which made me like shriek with laughter. Someone reported that, I think it was a Town Hall headline actually that he retweeted. And Town Hall had said, "Oh, Roberts might bring in the FBI to investigate this." And Jesse Kelly goes, "Oh, darn it. Then we'll for sure never find out who the leaker was." And just slayed me, absolutely slayed me, because yeah, that's true. So we'll see about that. So then we have, of course, this really interesting conundrum between Joe Biden and how the Democratic Party is reacting, because Joe Biden is leftist, right? He's very leftist, and he surrounded himself in his administration with Marxists, with Marxists on every front. He surrounded himself by people who are actually ideologically more radical than Joe Biden is. And David Harsanyi on Twitter pointed out today that in 1982, this is what he wrote, in 1982, Joe Biden proposed a constitutional amendment that would overturn Roe v. Wade and allow states to choose their own policies on abortion. This is exactly what the ruling, if the draft majority becomes the final ruling on Roe v. Wade, that's exactly what it would do. It doesn't illegalize abortion. It sends it back to the states. And in 1982, Joe Biden proposed a constitutional amendment that will do exactly what this ruling would do if this ruling is actually the final ruling. Which shows us, what does this show us? This shows us that Joe Biden, yes, he's a leftist. He's not as ideologically extreme as Planned Parenthood, as Elizabeth Warren, as Kamala Harris, as some of the other people who are in his administration. Similarly, in the 1990s, Biden actually bragged to his constituents about voting against abortion funding like 50 times. And then in 2003, Biden voted in favor of the partial birth abortion ban act. So he voted to make partial birth abortion illegal. So we have this interesting conundrum where Joe Biden, yes, he's a leftist, and he's chosen to surround himself by radical leftists, by people who are very extreme. Or maybe Dr. Jill Biden chose that. We don't know. Who's to say here? But regardless, Joe Biden ideologically is a little bit different than the Democrats' reaction to this draft majority opinion. And so it brings us to the question, why did this draft leak now? If it was written in February, which is when it's dated from, and if there's been no updates to the language of this draft opinion, and there's been no changes in the votes of the 5 justices who have put their names on this, which according to Politico, they haven't changed their mind since February, why leak this draft now? Why not leak it in February when it happened? Why not leak it a couple weeks before it's going to be published in June or July to make sure that it's the final version? Why would the Democrats leak it now? And this, I think, shows, or I think this is just really fascinating. And I want to talk about the political strategy behind leaking it at this precise moment. I'm sure I'm not the only one who's noticed everything is getting more expensive, and that is why I'm so grateful for American Hartford Gold. We are in the biggest economic crisis since 2008. Consumer prices are the highest we've seen in 30 years. Inflation is certainly here to stay. And if the government continues its out-of-control printing and spending, the dollar could continue its free fall and lose its coveted role as the world reserve currency. American Hartford Gold can show you how to hedge your hard-earned savings against inflation by helping you diversify a portion of your portfolio into physical gold and silver. They'll even help move your existing IRA or 401k out of the volatile stock market and into a precious metals IRA. This is why I like American Hartford Gold. They make it easy. They are the highest rated firm in the country with an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau and thousands of satisfied clients. And if you call them right now, they will give you up to $1,500 of free silver on your first qualifying order. So don't wait. Call them now. Call 855-768-1883. That's 855-768-1883. Or if you prefer a text message, you can text the word Liz to 65532. Again, the phone number, if you want to call them, is 855-768-1883. Or if you prefer text message, text LIZ to 65532. Okay, so why leak this draft now versus in February or closer to June or July when this would be made public? Here's why. Here is why they leaked it now. They leaked this draft now to distract the American public from inflation, to distract the American public from the gas prices that are hurting everyone, to distract from the botched energy policies that Democrats have been supporting for years, that Biden has implemented, that are now putting us in a position where we are actually risking going to war with Russia. A war with Russia, which could and will escalate into a nuclear war if it happens. They leaked this draft to distract from the fact that parents in both parties, Republican and Democrat, are completely opposed to the transgender ideology that is being taught to their children, the indoctrination that is happening to the children in public school, the fact that the teachers' unions that are pushing this indoctrination are tied to the Biden administration. They leaked this draft of this majority opinion overturning Roe v. Wade to distract you from the Ministry of Truth, the Disinformation Governance Board, headed by Nina Jankowicz. This terrible Orwellian speech police, this threat to your words and my words, where they tell us that if we say something that they don't like, it threatens political participation. It threatens our democracy. We are a safety risk for our opinions. They want to distract you from that. They want to distract you from Elon Musk breaking up the big tech monopoly, which is part of this evil trifecta of corrupt government officials being covered for by big tech that silences us so we can expose the corruption. And then in that information vacuum, big media comes and tells lies. Elon's breaking this up because he's buying Twitter. And the left wants to distract us from this. They want to distract us from the shrinking GDP. Biden tells us that everything's fine, the economy is good, but we know that that's not true. They want to distract us from this looming midterm election where they're facing an absolute shellacking, where they're almost guaranteed to lose the House by just enormous proportions. They're probably going to lose the Senate. And thus, Joe Biden and his radical leftist agenda is going to be neutered. And they did this. They leaked this draft to try to distract everybody from their failure. There is not one way, there's not one measurement, one policy, one area where we, the American people, are better off now under Biden than we were before. By every measurable standard, we are worse off. Things are going badly. The Biden administration's legacy is just failure after failure after failure. And it's not just a policy failure. It means that each of these policy failures equals us, we the people, being hurt. The Biden administration thinks that this will rally support among people for the Democrats for the midterms. And my friends, I think this is a huge political miscalculation. This is a huge mistake the Democrats are making, because abortion, even though it's a highly polarizing topic, it's very emotional. It causes very heated debates. It causes people to feel very strongly. It's actually not a topic that's a litmus test to all voters. It's not the number one or number two or number three topic on which people base their decisions about which candidate or which party to vote for. Not at all. In fact, the two demographics of voters who do base their vote on which candidates support abortion, meaning which voters primarily want to vote for candidates who support abortion, are white women, college-educated suburban white women, and then Black women. And this is where it becomes a political miscalculation, because both of these demographics, suburban, college-educated white women and Black women, already vote in large part for the Democrats. So the Democrats need in the midterms, they need to win over not just their base. They need to win over independents. They need to win over centrists. They need to win over even some, moderate Republicans. And they're not going to do that with abortion. The people that are going to be rallied or energized by abortion are already their Democratic voters, and already voters who will probably turn out for an election like this. So I think this is a huge political miscalculation. And my friends, I think the Democrats see this. As soon as this happened, they thought that the backlash against this majority opinion would be different than it was. They watched this unfold in the past couple of days. We saw the Politico reports. Then we read the 98-page opinion, this draft majority opinion, and then the Democrats watched as the American people were not galvanized to have another women's march, the pink knitted pussy hat. They were not galvanized in that way, and they're panicking. And this is their next strategy. You can tell they're panicking by how Schumer and how Collins are reacting. It's quite something. Now, I like Nutrafol for two reasons. It's natural and it works. Win-win. So we all know that half of the people watching my show right now are balding men. You know who you are. There's nothing to be ashamed of. But there is a holistic solution for men like you that promotes both healthier hair and whole body wellness without drugs or prescriptions. Nutrafol is clinically shown to improve hair growth, thickness, and visible scalp coverage without compromise. It is made of 21 potent natural ingredients that support sex drive, better sleep, and less stress too. In fact, in a clinical study, men showed progressive improvement in hair growth and thickness after 3 and 6 months. So you can grow thicker, healthier hair, and at the same time, you can support our show if you go to my URL, Nutrafol.com, and enter the promo code Liz. If you do that, you will save $15 off your first month subscription. This is their best offer anywhere. It's only available to US customers and for a limited time. Plus, you'll get free shipping on every order. Who doesn't love that? Get $15 off if you go to Nutrafol.com. It's spelled Nutrafol.com, Nutrafol.com, and use my promo code Liz. You'll get $15 off. Nutrafol.com, promo code Liz. So the Democrats are panicking because their tactic to galvanize voters in favor of Democrats in the midterm election almost immediately backfired. As soon as it was released, it backfired. And so we see this second phase of strategy where Schumer and Collins are now accusing Supreme Court justices, specifically Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett, although they aren't saying the name Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett. We know who they're talking about. They're accusing the justices of not even just lying, of perjury.
Mr. President, this is a dark and disturbing morning for America. Last night, a report disclosed that a conservative majority of the United States Supreme Court is ready to overturn Roe v. Wade and uproot decades of precedent affirming a woman's right to an abortion. If this report is accurate, the Supreme Court is poised to inflict the greatest restriction of rights in the past 50 years, not just on women, but on all Americans. Under this decision, our children will have less rights than their parents. The Republican-appointed justices' reported votes to overturn Roe v. Wade will go down as an abomination, one of the worst, most damaging decisions in modern history. Several of these conservative justices, who are in no way accountable to the American people, have lied to the U.S. Senate, ripped up the Constitution, and defiled both precedent and the Supreme Court's reputation.
His words are so absurd. I can't let this one pass. Our children will have less rights than their parents, he said. Which children, Senator Schumer? Are you talking about the children who won't be murdered in their mother's wombs, who won't be killed by abortion? Those children actually will have more rights than unborn children have had in our country since the 1970s. So that's the most absurd statement I've ever heard. The idea that Supreme Court justices are not accountable to the American people is false. Elections have consequences. It is the role of the chief executive, with the advice and consent of the Senate, who are representatives of the American people. The president nominates a Supreme Court justice, and the Senate approves them. These are actions taken by politicians, the president and the Senate, who are accountable to the American voter. So the idea that the judiciary is not accountable to the judiciary is a consequence of the decisions of the voter. So Schumer knows this. He's just trying to make it seem like you as the voter are powerless, that you have no control over what's being done to you. But that's a lie. But then we get to this pernicious argument that Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett lied to the U.S. Senate. So when a Supreme Court nominee is being interviewed by senators, it is tradition that the senators do not ask hypothetical questions. They do not ask, okay, well, when Roe v. Wade comes before you, how are you going to rule on Roe v. Wade? This is tradition that they don't ask that question directly. In fact, if you watch Supreme Court hearings or hearings for Supreme Court justices in the Senate, there will almost always be a question coming from a senator to a nominee that asks whether the president asked them hypothetical questions. So, for example, Kavanaugh would be asked, did President Trump ask you how you would rule on abortion? And the Supreme Court nominee says no, because it's tradition that in these meetings, they are not asked hypothetical, how you would rule hypothetical. And the reason for that is because, well, for this exact reason, because you shouldn't get a seat on the Supreme Court promising to do the political work of a particular party. Your role on the Supreme Court is to interpret the Constitution. And so the tradition is you're asked about jurisprudence. You're asked about past cases. You're asked about your own record or the history of Supreme Court rulings. And so the idea that Kavanaugh or Amy Coney Barrett lied to Collins or lied to Schumer, I mean, this, by the way, is Collins's quote. Collins said, if this leaked draft opinion is the final decision and this reporting is accurate, it would be completely inconsistent with what Justice Gorsuch and Justice Kavanaugh said in their hearings in our meetings in my office. So again, there should have been no question asked about the hypothetical, how they would vote in a case where Roe v. Wade was on the line. So what they're talking about then is the idea of precedent. Collins is famous for asking, well, what is your jurisprudence on settled law? What is your jurisprudence on precedent? Should these competing interests, right? The idea of precedent, there are competing interests. The interest of the Constitution and the interest of making sure that a ruling, even if another court got that ruling wrong, in the interest of the Constitution, then that ruling should be overturned. But those who push precedent or put precedent on a higher pedestal say the competing interest is for stability in the law, even if there's a wrong ruling, at least it's wrongly applied equally. I think it's a ridiculous jurisprudence. We've talked about this before. But Collins, that's where Collins stands. She thinks that precedent is just the top of the top. She thinks precedent can't be overturned. And so that's the question she asks Supreme Court nominees. What is your view on precedent? Do you think it's appropriate to overturn precedent? What is your respect for precedent? And I think the answer, I think you can say that you respect precedent and also understand that when precedent is wrong, not only do you have a right as a Supreme Court justice to overturn it, you actually have a duty to overturn it because your highest loyalty isn't to precedent. Your highest loyalty is to the Constitution of the United States. Obviously, Roe v. Wade is unconstitutional. It was never based in the Constitution to begin with. It was invented. We all know this, leftists and those on the right. Anybody who has a shred of intellectual honesty and any knowledge of the Constitution and the Roe v. Wade ruling knows this. But anyway, the point of this is that Schumer and Collins understand that they're panicking because they understand that that this draft being leaked is not going to galvanize the people that they thought it would galvanize. And so they're taking this into stage two. They are essentially accusing these justices of lying to the U.S. Senate. Lying to the U.S. Senate is perjury. It's a crime. And the reason that they're accusing these justices, not just of lying, but of lying in the U.S. Senate, which is perjury, which is a crime, is because that could then justify an impeachment of these Supreme Court justices. And that, of course, is what the left wants. They want a packed Supreme Court. They want only leftists on the Supreme Court. But they're ignoring something that we shouldn't be ignoring. And they're ignoring the words from this draft opinion itself. I want to read a couple of the passages that are, I don't know, they're chilling. They're really significant. These are some of the passages, or this is a passage that Alito wrote. He said, "We hold that Roe and Casey must be overruled. The Constitution makes no reference to abortion, and no such right is implicitly protected by any constitutional provision." He writes, "Roe was egregiously wrong from the start. Its reasoning was exceptionally weak, and the decision has had damaging consequences. And far from bringing a national settlement of the abortion issue, Roe and Casey have inflamed debate and deepened division. It's time to heed the Constitution and return the issue of abortion to the people's elected representatives. So here's what I would say. The only problem that I have with Alito's words in this entire 98-page argument is that I actually don't think that the right to life is something that should just be given to state legislatures. I think the right to life is one of those unalienable rights where government, and government being an institution that is just the self-governance of the people, right? The will of the people. I don't think that the will of the people and the government on behalf of the people can infringe on that right to life. The founding documents explicitly say our government was set up with no authority and no power to infringe on these unalienable, these God-given rights, these natural rights that existed before government. And I don't think that they actually can be returned to the state legislatures, and that state legislatures then can get to determine whether certain people in certain locations, like their mother's wombs, are deprived of those rights just for convenience and because popular will calls for it. I actually think it's the role of the Supreme Court to say, nope, the Constitution, there's no exception to the location of a person being entitled to these God-given rights in the Constitution, so you have no right to legalize abortion in any state. That's my quibble with Alito's writings. But this is what he says. In the years prior to Roe v. Wade, about a third of the states had liberalized their laws, but Roe abruptly ended their political process. It imposed the same highly restrictive regime on the entire nation, and it effectively struck down the abortion laws of every single state. It represented the exercise of raw judicial power, and it sparked a national controversy that has embittered our political culture for half a century. The inescapable conclusion, he said, is that a right to abortion is not deeply rooted in the nation's history and traditions. On the contrary, an unbroken tradition of prohibiting abortion on pain of criminal punishment persisted from the earliest days of the common law until 1973. That's pretty powerful. So both in legal history, in legislative history, and in world history meaning traditions, legal traditions, ethical traditions, and moral traditions that have informed the way that we formulated our government and our legal system, abortion has, in large part, been prohibited because we've acknowledged as a people that abortion is wrong because it ends the life of an unborn child. But this is a very interesting part. He says, we've long recognized, he's talking about precedent here. We've long recognized that stare decisis is not an inexorable command, and it is at its weakest when we interpret the Constitution. It has been said that it is sometimes more important that an issue be settled than it be settled right. But when it comes to the interpretation of the Constitution, the great charter of our liberties, which was meant to endure through a long lapse of ages, we place a high value on having the matter settled right. On many other occasions, this court has overruled important constitutional decisions. Without these decisions, American constitutional law, as we know it, would be unrecognizable, and this would be a different country. If that doesn't speak to you, if that doesn't touch your mind and your heart and your soul, particularly as it relates to this idea that settled law cannot be overturned, that precedent is somehow sacred and can't be readdressed even if it was wrong, that settled is better than settled right, I don't know a better argument for this. This is what the left wants to distract you from, because this is that level. These are first principles, right? The idea that, or the truth, the reality that life begins at conception, that's a human being, an individual baby, a child in the mother's womb. This is not a matter of ideology. This is not a matter of opinion. It just is. It's a first principle. It's not something that can be derived from something else. It's not a conclusion to two other factors or variables. It is just objective truth. It is something begot of God. And even those who reject the idea of God, well, you can reject it, but it doesn't mean that it's not true. It is simply a first principle, and the left hates nothing worse than first principles. They hate nothing worse than objective truth. They will do everything they can to obfuscate and distract you from first principles when those first principles contradict their political agenda. And There's no better evidence of this than Congressman Eric Swalwell on Twitter sent the most insane tweet that maybe I've ever seen. This is what he said. Let me bring this up. He said, the Republicans won't stop with banning abortion. They want to ban interracial marriage. Do you want to save that? Well, then you should probably vote. And he links to a leftist voting advocacy organization. And my reaction to this is, what? Actually, no. If we want to be completely authentic here, my reaction to this was, what the F? Like, are you joking here? There is not a single Republican in this nation, barring none, who wants to ban interracial marriage. In fact, the irony here is, think about who these justices are. The conservative justices who have signed on to this draft majority opinion. Think about who they are. It's Alito, he wrote it, and Gorsuch, and Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett, and who is the fifth justice? Well, it's Clarence Thomas, right? Clarence Thomas is the fifth justice, and who is Clarence Thomas married to? Clarence Thomas is a black man, and he's married to Ginny Thomas. His wife is a white woman. So they're coming for abortion and they want to come after interracial marriage? I don't think so, dude. You are so psychotic, so insane. Maybe you should stick to farting on TV and banging Chinese spies. That seems a little bit more on your IQ level, because this is just so insane. Nina Turner is a leftist congressional candidate, and she tweeted the following. She said, abolish the filibuster, codify Roe, expand the Supreme Court. No one should be able to tell anyone what they can or can't do with their bodies, period. And conservatives and pro-lifers actually make a mistake with this argument, because they always immediately say, well, it's not about the woman's body. It's about two bodies here, the body of the woman and the body of the baby. And that's true, of course. It's true. It's a good point. However, it's missing a greater point here. The government actually does regulate what we do with our bodies. The government does have power over what we do with our bodies. This hand that I have right here, this is part of my body, but I am not allowed to use it against someone else with impunity. I can't punch someone in the face using my body. I can't use this hand to kill someone else with my body. The government tells me what I am allowed to do or not do with my body when the action or the activity of my body violates someone else's inherent human rights. So conservatives miss this point that women don't have this absolutist idea of bodily autonomy. No, they don't. That's a ridiculous idea. Our bodily autonomy exists only to the point where it violates someone else's. And so conservatives, like I said, they miss the point on this, because there's no such thing as absolutist bodily autonomy. Then we have Ben Rhodes. Ben Rhodes, haven't heard from Ben Rhodes in a while, right? Not since he wrote all that fiction about the Iran deal. Ben Rhodes tweeted, George Bush and Donald Trump both lost the popular vote and appointed 5 of these judges who will shape American life, and on climate, life on Earth. Let's never miss the opportunity to talk about climate change. For decades, he says, some democracy. And so now, by the way, the left is going to use this idea, or use the fact that the Supreme Court is set to overturn Roe v. Wade, to try to go after the Electoral College too. They are shameless. The left is shameless. Anna Navarro tweeted, I got to bring this tweet up too, hold on. She tweeted, my best friend is a gay man. He called me this morning asking, how can the Supreme Court do this? I thought established law meant they couldn't go back and overturn things that have already been decided. Does this mean we have to be worried the rest of our lives? And she said, good question. So 2 responses to this. First of all, if the Supreme Court could not overturn precedents that was wrong when it originated, its original ruling, then it would literally still be legal right now in the United States for public schools to be segregated by race. Black children would be separated from white children based only on the color of their skin. Think about that. That's what Anna Navarro is suggesting, that the Supreme Court has no right to overturn, quote unquote, settled law. What would our nation look like if the Supreme Court had no right to overturn settled law? We would have segregation. We'd have racial segregation in our country. It would be legal to separate kids based on the color of their skin, to discriminate against children based on the amount of melanin that they have in their skin. If that isn't the most, I mean, it's really just this like very intellectually shallow, it's really a dumb argument. Like if you can't see that, if you don't understand that, if you were so ignorant about history that you would posit such a thing, then you shouldn't be a political commentator. The other part of this is her friend may have been talking about gay marriage. She may have been talking about the Supreme Court ruling on gay marriage and saying, do I have to worry the rest of my life? Well, you only worry if you think that that ruling was not constitutionally grounded. So if you think it wasn't constitutionally grounded, then yeah, go ahead and worry, because the Supreme Court can and should overturn rulings that are unconstitutional. Then we have Elizabeth Warren. I have never seen Elizabeth Warren like this. I have never seen her. I mean, she's actually freaking out.
How are you feeling?
I am angry.
Angry and upset?
Angry and upset and determined. The United States Congress can keep Roe versus Wade the law of the land. They just need to do it.
I've never seen you so angry. You seem to be...
This is what the Republicans have been working toward this day for decades. They have been out there plotting, carefully cultivating these Supreme Court justices so they could have a majority on the bench who would accomplish something that the majority of Americans do not want. 69% of people across this country, red states and blue states, old people and young people, want Roe versus Wade to maintain as the law of the land. We need to do that. And we have a right. Extremists, we've heard enough from the extremists. And we're tired of it. Thank you.
Senator, does this open the door for other constitutional rights?
So first of all, she's lying, just so you know. 80% of Americans, 80% want third trimester abortion to be banned. 60% of Americans want second trimester abortion to be banned. Abortion obviously is not about women's health. It's not about health at all. It's not healthcare. Abortion ends the life. It stops the beating heart of a growing, thriving human baby inside its mother's womb. There's no constitutional right to kill babies. We all know that is the case. But I have never seen Elizabeth Warren so agitated, so angry. It's like she didn't actually believe that the Supreme Court would or will overturn Roe v. Wade. And this is such a critical part of the Democratic apparatus, the Democratic monetary financial apparatus, where they get money, where they give money, their activism arm, the way that they subjugate women, the way that they keep women who are in tragic situations loyal to the Democratic Party. This is such a foundational policy of the Democratic Party to abuse women, to get them to be loyal to Democrats, that Elizabeth Warren is freaking out because she sees that this is all about to fall down. And then she tweeted, she doesn't waste an opportunity here. She tweeted, end the filibuster, codify Roe v. Wade with a national law, protecting abortion rights, expand the Supreme Court, stop this horrifying injustice in its track. And when I read this, I thought, this is interesting, because the funny thing is, if Harry Reid, who was a Democrat, obviously, had not abolished the judicial filibuster in the first place, setting the precedent for Republicans to do the same thing, play by the same rules. If, as I said yesterday, if Ruth Bader Ginsburg had actually retired instead of not retiring and then dying on the job, and if the Democrats, including Elizabeth Warren, had not gone full Christine Blasey Ford on Kavanaugh, which convinced Collins to vote for Kavanaugh, then this ruling would be very different. This probably wouldn't have happened at all. So Elizabeth Warren freaking out, this was begot of the left. Elizabeth Warren's own party, that behavior from the left. And then, of course, we have S.E. Cupp, a CNN contributor who, like Ana Navarro, claims to be a Republican, but I actually don't know one policy on which S.E. Cupp is actually conservative or Republican. She always agrees with Democrats. She goes, how would the right feel if D.C. versus Heller, Citizens United, or Hobby Lobby were overturned? Faith in the judicial branch of government is totally eroded if the highest court in the land makes a landmark ruling and then overturns it because of politics. Well, my question is the same, is the same question as I have for Ana Navarro. By this standard, did Brown versus Board of Education, did that erode faith in the Supreme Court? Of course it didn't. That actually increased faith in the Supreme Court because they were willing to say, we got something wrong and we're going to overturn it because right is right, regardless of precedent. And should the Supreme Court have refused to overturn Plessy due to the fact that it was precedent for so long before Brown versus Board of Education actually overturned it, even though Plessy was unconstitutional, obviously unconstitutional to begin with? I mean, these leftists, whether they're leftists who claim to be Republican in order to get CNN gigs, whether they are very radical leftists like Elizabeth Warren, they're freaking out because their tactic backfired. Their tactic to leak this document, this draft opinion, majority opinion on the Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade, it was intended to galvanize voters for the midterm election, galvanize support for Democrats, to distract voters from inflation, from gas prices, from Elon Musk buying Twitter, from all these radical leftist policies, these Biden policies, which threaten war with Russia, which hurts American families and individuals. It was supposed to distract us and help the Democrats not face this shellacking that they inevitably face come November in the midterm elections. It backfired. Their support is non-existent. It's not there, and they're freaking out. So they're resorting to lying about Supreme Court justices, to accusing them of perjury in order to set up an impeachment of these justices, in order to push their radical leftist agenda, to pack the Supreme Court, to abolish the filibuster, to codify Roe v. Wade into law via the legislature. Since they couldn't get the Supreme Court to do it, it is backfiring, and they, my friends, are terrified. I will leave you today with Jefferson, a quote from Jefferson. He was writing in 1985 about slavery, and it applies perfectly to today. He said, "Indeed, I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just, that his justice cannot sleep forever. Nothing is more certainly written in the book of fate than that these people are to be free." He wrote it then about slaves, but it is true now for unborn children. I'm going to be following this as it unfolds all week on Locals. You can join me at lizwheelershow.com/locals. Use the promo code LEAKER to get your first month free on your annual subscription. Promo code LEAKER at Liz Wheeler Show community or lizwheelershow.com/locals. We're going to be following this all week. It's great. Hit me up with any more leaker theories that you have, and we will be here for it all. Thank you for watching today. Thank you for listening. I'm Liz Wheeler. This is The Liz Wheeler Show.
The Liz Wheeler Show is produced by Jonathan Hay, executive producer Chad Abbott, director of photography Kevin McRoberts, editor Alejandro Figueroa, sound mixer Robin Fenderson, director of marketing Emily Wachsler, production and talent coordinator Matt Toffler, and senior publicist Patricia Jackson. This has been a Soundfront production.
If you haven't already, give this video a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button below, and ring the bell to make sure you never miss a video.